Okay, and we are recording. And this is online course design program for the DeKalb Public Library and the DeKalb patrons. And we'll give just maybe like 3 minutes, 3 more minutes for people to trickle in. For all participants, I'd ask you to mute your audio, um, just so then it'll only be the speaker speaking. But later, when we have time for Q&A, that's when you can have your mic on when you want to talk and ask questions. Oh, and there's more people popping in, so that's very good. Oh, more people, yay. I'm super happy about this program. I know because I myself here, I'll turn on my video again. So I know as an educator, we've all been thrown a loop with COVID. And I know for me, last year, around March, I know I had just gotten back from a conference in San Antonio. And, you know, I was looking, I teach Phi Comp at NIU. And I was like, okay, so I have a couple more projects to do, and then we'll have a huge showcase. And then, you know, my semester's set. And then COVID happened. And I was like, what do I do? It's all online. So I'm really happy now this semester that some of us have gotten confirmation from our departments that, you know, we are going to be online most of, for NIU at least, for the semester. I know other schools are doing other plans. So I thought, as I also am the adult services event planner for DeKalb Public Library, this might be helpful because there's a lot of educators who I know we're all kind of like, what are we going to do? Hybrid, not hybrid. Ah, I know I have felt the stress because I'm like, with English Phi Comp, you know, we're like a staple class of teaching freshmen. And so that there's that whole transition from college life or from high school life to college life. And that's where a lot of them make friends. And so I'm like, how do I create community in my vital class? So I'm really happy that I invited Amanda Smothers. Is it Smothers? Yes. Okay.
Oop. As I just turn off my video, and turn on my.
It happens. Oh,
They're right next to each other. So.
Yes. So it is Smothers, though.
Yes.
So, and she is from the teaching and learning she's the teaching and learning coordinator at Northern Illinois University Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. She has been teaching college English for 12 years. I bow down to her seniority. I've only been teaching for, this will be my third year. Woo. And has been teaching online for 8 years. Wow. At NIU, she helped faculty move their courses to remote delivery in the spring. Yes, she did. I know for our department, it was Eric Hoffman, who also coordinated with us, but I know you gave a lot of really awesome help and support and lectures, and oh man, we thank you so much. And I use Online Course Design Academy to prepare faculty to teach online in the summer and fall. So yes, so I'm going to now hand this program over to you.
Okay.
I will give you the hostship. So that might mean you might see people popping up and have to admit them.
All right. I'll keep my eye on the prize.
Zoom is just noise. There we go. I did it. Now I'm going to turn my video off. And this is recording. And yeah.
All right. So let me just share my slides with you guys. And let me open up the chat so I can share some links later on and open up the participants windows too so I can see that. Keep an eye on that. All right. All right. I'm just going to minimize my camera there. Okay, so welcome to today's discussion about online course design. And Rachel gave me a great introduction. So I'll just kind of put this up here. I got my PhD in English from Northern Illinois University, so I was right where you're at. 9 years ago, I was 3 years into teaching English at NIU. And I was a teaching assistant in the English department as well. But I earned my PhD in 2016 from NIU, and I've been their teaching and learning coordinator for about a year and a half now. So it's been a trial by fire. And I'm an adjunct professor of English at College of DuPage, Elgin Community College, and William Rainey Harper College, also just known as Harper. And as Rachel mentioned, I've been teaching college English for 12 years at community colleges and four-year universities, including NIU. And I've been teaching online courses for about 8 years, and I've taught using a lot of different learning management systems. I've mostly taught using Blackboard. That's what most of my schools use, but I've also taught using D2L and Angel, if anybody remembers Angel from a while back, if anybody used that. So I have a lot of different experience, and as Rachel also mentioned, I, as the teaching and learning coordinator, and I use Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, or I think we're calling it CITL is the acronym. I don't want to say CITL because that sounds like Skittle, so it's CITL. And my work there is primarily faculty support and faculty development, so we deliver a lot of programs for faculty online. Well, online mostly right now. We had a lot of primarily face-to-face workshops prior to the pandemic, but now we deliver everything online for now, and we meet with faculty virtually. I handle email requests from faculty. I think I had about 10 of them today that I was working through, in addition to coordinating the Teaching Assistants Institute, which is coming up next week. So that's my main responsibility right now. As well as preparing the Preparing to Teach Online course, for which I did a couple of videos for that too. And I'm also going to be teaching a course for TAs UNIV 595 this fall too, that'll help TAs teach online effectively. So that's going to be a semester-long course. So that's just a little bit about me. What we're going to cover today are just a few different topics. So the types of online course delivery, and we'll just talk mainly about two different types of online course delivery and what those look like generally. Designing an interactive online course, what does that look like? Scheduling assignments and due dates. How to create engagement and participation in your online course. So part of that is from the student's end, and then part of that is also from our end as educators. We don't just want to set it and forget it. Also talk about a typical week in teaching online, effective and efficient grading practices, some considerations for pandemic teaching, and then some technology tool options as well. And I'll show you one of them, sort of a little bit of a demonstration of one of those tools that's available online to anybody, because I don't know what kinds of learning management systems everybody's using, but I wanted to make it accessible for everybody. So the two basic types of online course delivery we're going to talk about to start off today are synchronous and asynchronous course delivery. So we'll talk about each one of these individually. Basically, synchronous is at the same time, so everybody's together at the same time, and asynchronous is sort of on your own time. So for synchronous, there's a set date and time that you're meeting. You want to try to have a consistent schedule with synchronous sessions, so you don't want them to be at different times and different days every week. You can have them every week at the same date and time. You can have them at the beginning of a module and then have the rest of the module be asynchronous. So you can kind of kickstart the module and go over things synchronously, and then kind of prepare them for working on their own asynchronously the rest of the module until you meet again. But generally with a synchronous session, you're going to be using web conferencing platforms. So for example, Blackboard Collaborate or Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Google Meet. So anything where you can meet with your students face-to-face in a way online. So virtual meeting. One of the benefits of synchronous sessions is that it provides us with immediate opportunities for feedback and communication with our students. So we can have students raise their virtual hand or post questions to the Q&A forum or to the group chat so that we can address those questions as they arise while we're teaching. And it can also help us create connections between ourselves and students and between students and students. So we're going to be able to interact with students in a live manner, whether they have their cameras on or not. You know, they might have their audio just on and just have a picture up, but at least you've got some sort of in the moment communication. Asynchronous, on the other hand, is there's no set date and time where students and faculty all have to be together virtually at the same time. So there's more flexibility with asynchronous, but you still have a consistent schedule. So for example, within modules or within week by week or within a unit. So this kind of teaching uses lecture capture platforms or software to record audio or to record video or slide lessons with audio. So you could use things like Blackboard Collaborate, Kaltura Capture, Screencastify, and Screencast-O-Matic are two free versions online that you could use to use screen capture. You can use PowerPoint. You can record PowerPoint presentations and save them as MP4 video files and upload those to your course, or upload them to YouTube so that they can be captioned, or upload them to Kaltura if you have Kaltura at your institution. Or you could use Prezi. A lot of people like to use Prezi as well, and you can also create a video presentation on Prezi. Feedback and communication for asynchronous sessions are not immediate because you're not all meeting at the same time, but you can create connections and you can create that feedback and communication asynchronously as well, as long as you include other opportunities for engagement and for students to engage with the material and show you their knowledge of the material that they've just covered. So for example, in a quiz and a discussion board, something like that. So the next thing that we'll talk about is designing an interactive online course. So there's a few different options for this. You can use modules, weeks, or units to organize your online course. So I've used, a lot of times modules and weeks can be used interchangeably. So, you know, a week equals a module or a module equals a week. You can also use it for different blocks of time if you want. I've recently started using units to organize my online course because I found that to be a little bit easier with moving from semester to semester because I do teach online a lot. So I'll use, you know, 4 units for my Composition 1 class, for example, and they've got a paper due at the end of each unit. And I open up the whole unit to the class, and then there's a due date for all of their initial discussion posts, due dates for formative assessments, and then the due date for the draft, peer review, and revision at the end of the unit. So I found for me and for my students that works well. It gives them a little bit more flexibility than having a due date every single week, and for discussion so that they can kind of work based on their other courses, based on their work schedules, because I do teach at community colleges primarily. You know, a lot of my students have full-time jobs or children, families, and so giving them as much flexibility as I can is my goal there. And it seems to be working well with the units, but you know what's best for your students. You know, for younger students, it might be better to have, you know, weekly modules where they've got more of a consistent schedule. So that kind of structure might work better for other situations. What we do recommend, or what I recommend, is having a consistent template for each module online. So this is just an example of the different sections that you might have in a template for that module. So you might have a module overview with learning outcomes. So what course outcomes are you going to be addressing within that module? And then, what are the assessments? What are the readings and resources that are going to be required? Discussions, due dates, the lessons, topics. And then you might also want to add a little bit more engagement. So instead of just writing all of that out, you might write it all out and then also have it communicated in a video. So maybe just a video of you explaining the module and what students can expect there. And that way it provides a couple of different ways for students to get that information. And also to create a little bit more interaction in your course online, think beyond text. So for example, at the beginning of the semester, record a video welcome message maybe that uses screencasting to show your students around the online course and where they can find different things. Or create a video that's just of you that gives your students an idea of who you are as a person and introduces yourself to the class so that they feel more of a connection to you. And then you can also have students think beyond text as well and let students have their own intro submission. So maybe in a discussion thread, they might record a video with their phone and then upload that to the discussion thread. And different learning management systems have different programs for that and different ways of doing that. But there are definitely opportunities to incorporate more than just text-based communication in an online course. And then one last thing for this slide for considering interactivity in an online course is to consider your session length. So for either asynchronous or synchronous lessons, excuse me, my throat. So for either asynchronous or synchronous lessons, you want to think about how much time students are going to be spending sitting there watching. So we recommend it in NIU's Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. What we recommend to faculty is 5 to 10 minutes max length. So you might have an hour-long lecture, break it up into 5 to 10 minute segments, and then have those as sort of little bite-sized nuggets of information, and then incorporate opportunities for engagement in between. So maybe they watch this one and then they do a short little quiz, or they watch the next one and they have to post to a chat forum or discussion forum. And then that holds true as well for synchronous sessions. So you're in a Zoom session like this one, and you want to maybe give your students opportunities to apply what they've learned. So you give them, some information, introduce a concept, and then they go and they talk about it in small groups and breakout rooms, or you give them a worksheet that they can work on interactively, a shared worksheet or something like that, some sort of way to engage them. And just on that note, if anybody has any questions too that pop up as I'm talking here, I know I'm not maybe demonstrating the active learning aspect that I'm telling you guys to do. So do what I say, not what I do. But if you have any questions and they pop up, just shoot them in the group chat, and then I will always pause to answer questions there as well. So I'm keeping an eye on that. So if you have anything specific that you want to know based on what I'm talking about on a particular slide or a topic, then just let me know. Okay, so next, let's talk about scheduling assignments and due dates. What I like to do is I like to use a calendar to map out my due dates. And I also give this calendar to my students because I find that and it doesn't have to be a calendar like this calendar. It can be, just kind of a list of your due dates in order, or sort of a course schedule of sorts. But I like to map out my due dates for all of my classes so that I can make sure that I'm balancing my time as well. So I've got a master calendar for all of my courses that kind of gives me the bigger picture of when things are due, so that I'm prepared for that. And then I give individual course calendars to my students so that they know when due dates are for the entire semester. So that they can predict that, they know what to do for scheduling work. So they know if they've got an assignment that's due on, September 13th, and they have to work all weekend, maybe they need to get that done on the 11th. So communicating with students, giving them as much information as possible so that they can prepare for our class will help them succeed. I also try to keep consistent due dates and times. So discussions may not be due every week for my class because I do use that unit model, but I have the discussion posts, initial posts, always due on the same day of the week and time. All of my stuff is due at 11:59 p.m. I used to do midnight, but then students were confused as to whether midnight was, Tuesday or Wednesday. So 11:59 p.m. is a little bit clearer. And I haven't had those questions from students since I switched to that time. And then all of the peer responses are going to be due on, Thursday, 11:59 p.m. And then all assignments are going to be due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So they may not have something due every week, but they know, when they're looking at their calendars, okay, this is when the day of the week that these different types of assignments are going to be due, and they can kind of predict that a little bit better too. And also, when we're scheduling assignments and due dates, we want to maintain reasonable expectations both for ourselves and for our students. So considering what our expectations are in this new kind of situation that we find ourselves in, and students, and we're all trying to navigate it. So being kind to ourselves and being kind to our students never hurt. So a little bit more on engagement and participation in an online course. What I recommend for engaging students in the online course, in addition to the things that I've already mentioned about, providing more than just text-based communication and using video to create connections with your students, but providing regular opportunities for asynchronous discussion is also helpful. You might also want to have some maybe social options for students too, a water cooler, or a little virtual cafe where students can go and talk about other things, or if you have groups in your class, having a group workspace for them to connect with their group members, whether that's a discussion board or in Blackboard Original Course View, there's, when you create groups, there's actually a group homepage where they can go, and there's a bunch of different tools that they can use within their groups. So yeah, Kent, we can talk about asynchronous discussions. So what is your question about asynchronous discussions? And you can too open up your microphone if you wanted to ask.
Hey, Amanda,
Verbally.
thanks.
Hi.
So yeah, my question, I'm a learning development professional in the corporate space.
Okay.
But an educator nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to pardon me, I'm outside, so there might be some surrounding noise.
No problem.
So, that's been one of my challenges, and one of the things that I've been watching closely in all these Zoom webinars, whatnot, is just how, because as a classroom teacher, facilitator, you're accustomed to being in the classroom, you're accustomed to watching body language,
Mm-hmm.
watching, whether they're getting bored or they're shuffling their feet or becoming disinterested or getting excited about the topic. And it's, that reading the room
Mm-hmm.
concept, is something I've done my whole career, and I feel like I lose that online. And so you're talking about opportunities for asynchronous discussion. You obviously have a lot of experience with it. How do you do it to make it effective and to try to replicate a classroom? I know you can't copy it, but what are the things that you've learned in that
Yeah.
regard?
Yeah. So the way that I have asynchronous discussion, and I've done it a few different ways, I'll have a discussion board, and I have very clear expectations for participation in my discussions. So, I have a rubric to grade discussions as well, because I feel that, my students tend to take it a little bit more seriously and actually participate if they do have that. There's also different platforms, like I just recently used Yellow Dig at NIU, which we're piloting this year, which kind of gamifies discussion. So it gives different amounts of points. If you post earlier in the week, it gives you more points than if you post later in the week, to encourage, early posting. You get more points if somebody reacts to your post with an emoji or a reaction. And then you also get a certain amount of points if somebody replies to yours. So it kind of creates multiple opportunities for getting students engaged with the discussion. But I think having clear expectations, I also have expectations for students for how many posts they're supposed to respond to. And then if they respond to somebody's reply to their first post, they can still get credit for that too, to kind of emphasize that this is kind of an ongoing dialogue. So, I think also the prompts that you have students make a difference too. So, or to your whoever you're teaching, trying to come up with thought-provoking or engaging prompts. You can also use video prompts. So later on, I'm going to talk about different kinds of technology tools that you might be able to use. So maybe something controversial or something to get the ball rolling with discussion, post a YouTube video that addresses an issue you want them to talk about, and then, what are your reactions to this, and engage in that dialogue. So, and modeling is important too. So not just expecting them to participate in the discussion, but us also participating in that discussion too, without taking it over. We want them to take some ownership of it, but we also want to model, this is how we reply, even if that's just, oh, this is a fantastic response, kind of highlighting somebody who's done a really great job. Does that answer your question at all?
It does, and I actually asked it incorrectly. I meant synchronous
Oh,
discussion.
synchronous, yes.
But the answer you provided was very helpful, like the gamification of it and setting ground rules and things like that. That's all very helpful as well. But yes, also around synchronous discussions.
Yeah, synchronous discussions are tricky too when you're using like Zoom. I know a lot of teachers have liked Zoom because you can see the big, huge grid of all the students, but it doesn't really replicate what it's like being in a classroom. And, you can see a little thumbnail of a student, but you can't really make out too much depending on how many students are in the class or how many participants you have. So I think that for synchronous discussion, doing similar things that you do in the classroom or in training session, of maybe calling on a student to find out what they wanted, or if they have something to say, providing options for them to interact, so allowing them to just use microphone, or allowing them to use video if they want to, or to use the chat box as well. And then also, using breakout groups to allow them the opportunity to have more intimate conversations with small groups. I do that in my face-to-face classes because invariably I come up with these great discussion questions, if I do say so myself, and then there's crickets. But as soon as I have them get into a group of 3 or 4, they start talking. So that might be an option too, is, having smaller group discussions online so that they feel a little bit more comfortable, and it's harder to hide behind their computer screen and try to let somebody else, take over the conversation or take on the responsibility, is another option. And then you can bounce around into those breakout groups as well, and make sure that people are actually talking, and maybe kind of nudge them along a bit too. Is that helpful?
Which replicates a classroom environment in a workshop setting, right?
Yeah.
Where you set them all off on a task and then walk around the room and make sure they're on task.
Yep.
And one more question, and I'll stop. Is Do all of the software platforms, LMSs that you've talked about, Blackboard, et cetera, do they all offer the features of whiteboard and breakouts? Is that all part of the software?
Yeah, so I know Zoom offers breakouts. I'm not as familiar with Zoom because we use mainly Blackboard, Collaborate, and Microsoft Teams at NIU because those are our supported platforms. We do have some limited Zoom licenses for people who really like that platform. But like Blackboard Collaborate has a whiteboard feature, it has breakout room feature, has screen share feature, and so does Microsoft Teams as well. Because I think Microsoft Teams uses the O365 whiteboard, so that you can use that too. So a lot of them have similar features for
Thank
that
you.
engagement. No problem. All right, any other questions before I continue on? Okay, so just provide regular opportunities for discussion asynchronously, multiple ways for students to contribute as well. So for example, I don't hinge all of their participation points on one type of participation. I try to give them different ways to contribute to the conversation. Group work or small group discussions are another way to engage students and get them to participate in online courses I mentioned. Having them in a synchronous session, have a small group, breakout group discussions works really well to get them talking. As long as you give them something specific to talk about. If you're just like, go and discuss something, of course, they're going to sit there quietly not knowing what to talk about. So give them some sort of prompt that can guide their discussion or spark their discussion. Synchronous discussions provide options for communicating in synchronous modes too. So allow them to use just the microphone if they don't feel comfortable using video. Or they could use video, they could use the chat box as well. Maybe they've got a dog barking in the background, that's usually me. Or maybe they've got younger siblings or children who are making noise, or a spouse or another family member who's working from home or doing e-learning at the same time. So give them some different options for ways that they can participate in those discussions and engage in the course without feeling like they have to participate in one specific way. Also, as I already mentioned, limit the length of your lectures and incorporate active learning opportunities every 5 or 10 minutes or so, so that you can make sure that students are staying engaged. So it's a lot harder for them to just tune out if they know, okay, 5 minutes from now, I'm gonna be asked to do something, or I might be called on to share, my opinion. And you can also use, polling software, clickers, or polling features in your web conferencing software to poll students every so often, to engage them in that way too. It doesn't have to be a full-blown, group discussion or going into breakout rooms every single 5 to 10 minutes of a class, but kind of finding ways to switch it up and give them opportunities to just make sure that they're still with you, and still engaged in the class, and actually applying what they're learning. And then also, on a final note for the engagement and participation piece, would be to hold online or virtual synchronous office hours. So I'm actually going to be delivering a workshop entirely on virtual office hours 2 weeks from now at NIU. But virtual office hours are a great way to connect with your students one-on-one, to get them more comfortable with you, to create those opportunities for engagement with students. So what I recommend is you can have sort of asynchronous office hours. I usually have a Q&A discussion board in my LMS in Blackboard or D2L, which are the two that I'm using right now, where they can ask questions. They can post questions that they think other people might have as well, and then I can post an answer to that question. Or I can have, I have a policy where I'll give students a little bit of extra credit if they're the first one to respond with the correct answer to their classmates' question. So that kind of keeps them looking at that space as well, to keep an eye on it. and actually see their classmates' questions and the answers to those questions, and maybe take a little bit of the workload of answering those questions off of me. But asynchronous is great, but we also want to have that same synchronous opportunity too. So you might go back and forth for an entire day with an issue that a student's having or confusion that a student's having via email versus 15 minutes or 30 minutes in a face-to-face virtual synchronous office hour session. So with virtual synchronous office hours, you would use, your learning management system or another web conferencing tool that you have. You can use Zoom, you can use Microsoft Teams, you could use Collaborate, you could use Google Meet, whatever way you want to meet with your students, just make sure that they know how to get there. Something else that I recommend is requiring that they make, a 5-minute appointment with you during your office hours in the first couple of weeks of class, so that they've done it once and they know how to get into your virtual office, and they're less intimidated by the process when they do have a question later on in the semester, or they're having difficulties later in the semester when that's a stressful time for them, and they might be nervous to make an appointment in your virtual office. So have specific office hours set every week that you're going to be virtual office hours. You might want to do a combination of appointments and some open office hours too. So maybe 2 hours that are set for appointments and 1 for open, or vice versa. And so students during the appointment hours, they have to schedule an appointment during that time. They can't just drop in. And then the open one is just for anybody who maybe has a last minute question. You might also want to have a time frame for which students can schedule meetings with you. So whether that's a couple of hours before your office hours begin or 24 hours, so you have enough lead time. And then that's where that 1 or 2 hours of just open office hours might come in handy, because a student might, not have a question, and then the day comes of your office hours and they say, oh, I do have a question, so I'm going to go to the open office hour. So if you do open office hours, have a policy and communicate that with your students or with your participants for how you're going to handle if multiple people drop in at the same time. So what's your policy if multiple people drop in your face-to-face office hours? How can you translate that to the virtual environment? So for example, if you're using Zoom, you might have a slide up in the main room that says, hold on, I'm meeting with students in the breakout room, and I'll call you in to the breakout room, bring you in as you entered my virtual office. So, you can then meet with a student one-on-one in a breakout room while the other students are waiting. Or you can have the lobby on Zoom enabled, so that students have to wait in the lobby until you let them in as they started waiting in the lobby. So, there's different options for how you could do that. For scheduling, you can use, if you have an institution Outlook, Microsoft 365 or Outlook subscription, then you can have students use the scheduling assistant through that to schedule a time with you, or you could just use something as simple as having a spreadsheet that's a shared file that you link to in your course, and they just click on it, and then they see what office hours are available in their spreadsheet, and they can sign up for it there. So you can go fancy or you can go simple. It depends on how much time you have and how much headache you want. But definitely holding those online synchronous office hours are going to help you connect with your students one-on-one, get to know your students a little bit more, especially if you require that first session where they just kind of come to chat with you and get a feel for what the experience is like. So a typical week in online teaching, I don't know that there's one typical week in online teaching, but I think that you should make a typical week for yourself in online teaching by creating a schedule, a predictable schedule for yourself. So when we're teaching fully online, and I found this when I first started, it can be easy for time to get away from you, and it's more difficult to create that sense of routine for yourself. You have to be very intentional about it, and that's same for students too. If you're not doing, synchronous sessions. So if you've got synchronous sessions every Monday, Wednesday, or Monday through Thursday, or whatever it is, depending on, what level of school you're teaching or how you're teaching. If you're completely asynchronous, it can get away from you, especially the grading portion. So we don't want to just set it and forget it and then realize a few weeks later that we have a pile of grading to do, or that students are falling behind because we haven't been engaged with our course. So a typical week in online teaching should be engaged. You should be interacting with your course. You should be logging into your course multiple times. You should be interacting with your students. You should be checking email. You should have a communication policy for your course of when students can expect a response from you if they do send you an email, or if they post to a Q&A discussion forum in your learning management system. So have those policies and then stick to them. My policy is usually within 24 hours, I'll respond to student messages. And I do tell them that they might not hear from me over the weekend. So at first, when I first started teaching, especially teaching online, I was on call 24/7. I was answering questions at midnight and at 5 a.m. So I finally took a step back and realized that I needed to set some boundaries. And so my students know, I'm going to check my email during the workday. I might not be checking it after 4 p.m., but you'll hear from me within 24 hours. And I'm probably going to be checking more sporadically over the weekend unless there's a major assignment due. So create those expectations for your students so that you can create a sense of routine and boundaries for yourself as well, and so you don't feel like you're always on. And also have a set schedule for when you're going to communicate with your students regularly. So for example, in this image here, you might have a weekly announcement that goes out at the beginning of your weekly module. Just to announce to students the weekly modules here. You can view the overview, the video is there with the overview as well, whatever housekeeping that you have for that week, just to announce to students that, I'm here, I'm still with you, I'm in the course is open, we're moving along. And then maybe you have a couple of days of grading after that to grade the previous week's assignments. So my grade on Tuesday, finish up my grading on Wednesday, and then send my grading finish announcement. So grades for last week have been posted, feedback has been posted, let me know if you have any questions. And then a due date reminder maybe on Thursday for any major assignments, or if you have assignments or due dates earlier in the week before, you might have reminded them of the due dates that were coming up the following week if you've got one earlier in the week. For example, a discussion post, or maybe in your weekly announcement, if you've got something due on Tuesday or Wednesday, you might mention it there and then do another due dates reminder on Thursday. So create some sort of schedule for yourself so that you've got, these are the days that I'm going to do these things. And, maybe you need an extra day for grading when there's big projects or a major assessment, but you should be able to keep pretty on track with teaching, with grading, if you have a set schedule and a routine
Real
that you
quick question.
establish. Yeah.
Sorry, thought you were done.
Oh, no, you're fine. Go ahead, Ken.
And are the systems you're using, Blackboard, et cetera, capable of setting up those reminders on an automatic basis so they're automated?
It depends. So at NIU, we have both original course view, which has been around for a long time, and then we also have ultra course view, which is newer. You can set announcements ahead of time in both views. You can set announcements ahead of time. There's some different features available in original. For example, you can, if you're setting up an announcement ahead of time, you can't do this, but if you're setting it up in the moment, you can also send it to email to students too, which if you're setting it, you know, at the beginning of the semester, setting up all of your announcements, then maybe, then it wouldn't go out to email too. You'd have to go in and manually do that. But yes, you are able to schedule those things. What I do is I set up my entire course, all of the modules and the learning materials and everything before the semester begins. And I set each module to open on and close on a specific day and time, so that at least that's one less thing that I have to worry about. It's just going to automatically open. Everything is there for the students. And then I don't have to worry about remembering that. I can remember, I can go in and maybe participate in the discussion boards, or, you know, work on engaging with students instead of worrying about that housekeeping stuff. So you can, something that you might want to consider is maybe tweaking your weekly announcement if you notice something that, you know, comes up. So you might set it, you know, schedule your announcements ahead of time, and then, you know, something comes up the week before that you notice that you really want to add, then you can add it to your weekly announcement that's set to go out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? All right. So next we'll talk about effective and efficient grading practices, and I could go on about this a long time, but along with setting up a schedule for yourself and creating that course calendar where you can plot out when your due dates are and when assessments are, pace your grading, create that course calendar so you can keep track of when things are coming due in all of your courses. And then also, I'm a big proponent of grading with rubrics, especially interactive learning management system rubrics. So I create my rubrics on Blackboard using their interactive rubrics, and D12 also has interactive rubrics. So what a rubric consists of, the most important parts are their criteria. That's what students are going to be assessed on, levels of performance of that assessment. So how did they do? And then I write pretty detailed descriptors for each criteria and level of performance, so that I can give students a lot of information about their performance without having to retype the same thing over and over again based on the student's performance on a criteria. And then they get more extensive feedback without me having to take extensive time grading, but I also do still give them individualized comments on their work as well. So they get a lot of feedback, but it doesn't take as much time. It takes more time just to set the rubrics up and to create the actual rubrics at the beginning of the semester. And I do share the rubrics with students too, so that they know exactly what they're going to be graded on. They can look at the rubric, they know, okay, you know, this is worth this percentage of my grade. You know, content is worth this percent, organization is worth this percent. I teach writing mostly, composition. So, you know, those are important things. And then, you know, formatting is going to be worth this amount. And then they can see the descriptors too. So they know what, you know, an exemplary is going to look like for content development, and they know what a novice or a poor performance is going to look like for that as well. When you're grading with rubrics, you want to keep the number of levels of performance low. So I wouldn't go more than 5 levels of performance, because then you get into, it becomes very difficult to distinguish between levels of performance when you have too many of them. So I tend to do 4 or 5 levels of performance depending on the assessment. And it also makes grading really easy if you're doing asynchronous discussions too. So I have a discussion rubric that I use the same discussion rubric for each of the discussions for the class, so they know what's expected in their first post. They know what's expected of them in terms of engagement with their peers and replying to peers' posts. They have that rubric too, and then that makes grading discussions easier as well. And then the nice thing about the interactive rubrics that integrate with the learning management system is that they're connected to the assignment. they're connected to the student's assignment, and they're connected to the grade book. So once you click all the boxes and then type in whatever additional feedback that you have for the student and save that, the student will be able to access that feedback and the filled out rubric so that they know why they got the grade that they did, and then it will generate the grade in the gradebook for you. So it makes grading a lot easier or a lot quicker once you've actually created the rubrics. You can find, you don't have to recreate the wheel with rubrics. There's a lot of rubric repositories online, or, you know, use the resources around you, use your colleagues. Your colleagues might have rubrics that they've created and that you can borrow and edit. And that is with Blackboard. It's also with D2L. I believe Canvas also has interactive rubrics too. So most learning management systems do have interactive rubrics. If you're not using a learning management system, then that's different, but you can still find rubrics and you can still use rubrics. It just might not be as instant as with an interactive rubric in a learning management system. No problem. So for example, you know, you might create a rubric in like a Word document. So if you don't have a learning management system, you might create it in a Word document and then fill it out for each student, and, you know, use the color fill to fill in the boxes and then add up their points. So it'll be a little bit more manual then, but the feedback piece is still there. So it still makes things a little bit more streamlined, because I used rubrics before I started using Blackboard at NIU, because we've had Blackboard for a long time at NIU, but it wasn't always widely used. And when I started as a graduate assistant, a teaching assistant in the English department, we didn't use it. We used Webboard, which is basically just kind of like a repository for like documents. So we used that, and then we started using Blackboard, and I liked reading it on paper, and I liked, you know, attaching the rubric to it. And then I started teaching 5 to 10 classes a semester as an adjunct faculty member when I was a full-time adjunct, and that was just unsustainable, and I started getting back and neck problems from lugging around all the papers. So I converted to electronic grading very quickly from there, and it's great. And then also recommend using embedded or digital annotation tools and limiting the number of comments. That doesn't mean not providing comments. You do want to provide comments. You don't just want to slap a grade on there. You want students to understand why they got the grade that they got, but whereas you might have collected hard copy papers, or, you know, if you've been teaching for a long time, you might prefer printing out their papers and writing directly on them and then scanning that and uploading it to your computer and, you know, sending that to them via email or something. But there are more efficient ways to do that. So you can use embedded or digital annotation tools. Learning management systems usually have some sort of digital annotation tool. Blackboard has just rolled out their new version. They used to use Box, and now they created their own version that's much improved, and it's called Blackboard Annotate. So learning management systems have that. If they don't, then you can use just plain old Microsoft Word, for example. There's a comments feature. You highlight the place where you want to give a comment, and then you click comment, and you can write marginal comments on the student's paper, save it, and then upload it and send it back to them. So digital or embedded annotation tools will save you a lot of time over you know, printing and, you know, handwriting. Even though you may prefer that, it is time consuming. So if you find yourself, you know, needing to become a little bit more efficient with your grading to keep up with it, then digital annotation is definitely recommended. And then also limiting the number of comments. So I know that when you mark up a student's paper with a lot of comments, they're probably not going to read them. They're probably going to see it and feel bad because there's so many things wrong with their writing or wrong with their assignment. So what I like to do is limit the number of comments per page of an essay, for example, to what's the most important thing that I want them to address ahead of the next assignment. So writing development is an iterative process. What's the most glaring issue here that I want them to correct for the next assignment, and then I can switch, and focus on another problem. So you don't have to point out every single thing that they need to improve, but what's the most important thing that they need to improve? And then hopefully they'll improve on that. You can work with them to improve on that for the next assignment, and then you can move on to, okay, here's another issue. And then also, as I've been kind of belaboring, establish a routine and a reasonable time frame for feedback and grades. So establish that routine for yourself when you're going to grade, and stick to that. You want to get grades and feedback back to students in a time frame where they can actually learn from that feedback. So if they're not getting their essay grade or their project grade until after they've already submitted the next project, then they're not going to benefit from any feedback that you've provided on that project or on that assignment, or on even that discussion post. So that's why it's really important to have a reasonable time frame for feedback. And I typically try to get feedback within a week turnaround, because that's especially important if you're doing weekly modules in an online class, because you don't want them to get 3 weeks in and find out that they're doing discussion all wrong and their grade just takes a big hit. So and a way that you can maybe mitigate that a little bit, and give yourself a little bit more wiggle room, is to drop the lowest discussion grade, or drop the 2 lowest discussion grades if you're doing 16 weeks of discussions. So reasonable time frame for feedback and grades, I do a week. You might do up to 2 weeks depending on the assessment and what your course schedule is like. But even formative assessments, those assessments that build up to that major assignment that students are supposed to be learning from, that's where they really need that feedback really quickly, so that they know what they're doing, that they need to improve ahead of turning in that major assignment. All right, and then that reasonable time frame for feedback. Also consider when you're looking at your course calendar, do I need to have all of the normal routine assignments due in the same week that I have a major assignment due? So if you've got, discussion, peer responses, and and some sort of engagement activity due every week, and then you have a major assignment that is due in another week, do we need to have all of those smaller assignments due in that week as well? Do we need those discussions in that week, or can we maybe give them a little bit of flexibility so that they can work on that major assignment and maybe focus on that a little bit more? So think about that too. What's the purpose of those assessments, and what are you hoping students get out of them? And then also consider yourself too. So if you have a major project or essay due, do you want to also be grading discussion posts and those other smaller assignments at the exact same time, or do you want to be able to prioritize and give more attention to those major assignments too, and maybe ease up on the shorter assignments? So I have just a few considerations for pandemic teaching. One I've kind of addressed already is student privacy and webcam requirements. I've heard from more faculty talking about how this has been an issue. So we kind of just rushed to get our courses online to do remote teaching in the spring. Things had to be done very quickly. And now we can kind of think through things a little bit more, and the policies that we have and the requirements that we have. And one of those is student privacy and webcams. So this can be an equity issue. Maybe a student doesn't want you to see into their home. Maybe they come from a low-income family and they don't want you to see that, and they want, when they're in the classroom, you can't tell necessarily that. So Thinking about equity in teaching is really important, and whether having a webcam requirement, you can have it as an option, but whether having a webcam requirement is really necessary, and intruding on student privacy is really necessary. And that goes also for, I know a lot of people are trying to think about testing and how to prevent students from cheating in tests, and they are thinking about using online proctoring services like Respondus, Lockdown Browser, and these other options that require a webcam and require students to be recorded while they're taking the exam. And there's a lot of different, not only privacy issues with proctoring software, but also just practical issues, such as, a student, if you're using a proctoring for an exam, a student can't get up, they can't, if they do anything that other than looking at the screen, it's going to flag that, and you're going to have to take a look at that recording and see what the student was doing and tell whether, it looks like they're cheating or not. So, if they've got siblings running around, that might interfere, that noise might interfere and flag that student. If they lose internet connection, they don't have reliable internet, it's going to kick them out of the test, and they're not going to be able to take that test. And you're going to have to go back in, they're going to have to contact you, you're going to have to go in, you're going to have to enable them to be allowed to take that test again. Student privacy issues are something that we definitely need to take into consideration, and whether webcams should be required or whether we should allow them to be optional, or how we can be sensitive to students' concerns. And I know there have been some faculty at NIU and at other places that I teach who have heard from students that they feel like requiring webcams is intrusive. So, you might want to communicate with your students about that. Talk to them about how they feel about that. And then also another consideration for pandemic teaching would be COVID illness and quarantine. So consider, what will happen if students get ill with COVID, or if their family member and they have to quarantine. So are you teaching fully online? Will they be able to keep up with the course online, or are you teaching hybrid where sometimes they have to be in the classroom? And do you have a contingency plan for students to be able to access your course remotely? So are you going to be recording your in-class sessions, your face-to-face sessions, or live streaming them, as some faculty at NIU will be doing with our hybrid model, where students are going to be taking turns coming to the physical classroom, and when they're not in the physical classroom and the other group is in the physical classroom, that lecture is going to be live streamed. And then how can you engage those students who are at home while the other students are in the classroom? What are you going to do in those circumstances? And then, if a student does become very ill and can't keep up with the class, what plan do you have in place for that so that they can still succeed in the class if possible? And then for yourself too, what happens if you are ill with COVID? You have a positive test result, or you have to be tested and then you have to be quarantined until you get your test results. What are your contingency plans? And what are the policies at your institution surrounding that, so that you can continue to facilitate your students' learning in an effective way. And then that all kind of just leads into flexible course policies. So I think what the pandemic has maybe hit home for people is that things do come up that are out of our control. We can have flexible course policies that do account for those unforeseen circumstances. So what are your policies going to be specifically in the time that we're in right now and during the pandemic? But then also beyond that, are you going to maybe learn from this experience that maybe being inflexible isn't the best way to go, and maybe you do want to increase your flexibility with students with regard to being able to keep up with work if something personal and unexpected happens in their life. Another consideration is library access. So this is a little bit twofold on library access. Bye, Kent. So twofold on library access. First, are you going to require students to go to the library physically? Do they have access to the library physically? That'll vary from institution to institution. So some libraries might be closed to the general student body. You might have to make appointments to go to the library. But also think about online library access. So what resources are available to students online? How can you give them access to those materials remotely so that they don't have to come to campus if A, they're not able to, but also B, if they aren't comfortable coming to campus because of the pandemic and they're worries about that, or if they're being quarantined for COVID and they're not allowed to leave and they still need to access that material. So how can you give them library access? And then also work with your institution's library. You might be able to they might be able to create for you, a resource page for your class or for your department. So work with them, work with your subject specialists as well if you have them in your library, because they're a great source of information, and they have a speciality in particular subjects. So they're a really great source for finding specific resources that are going to help your students in your discipline. And then Emily is mentioning that there's a lot of apps for access to the library. OneDrive is one, Hoopla for kids. So yeah, and if anybody has any resources that they want to share, please do share them to the chat. I have a few that I'm going to share later on too. Another consideration, and DeKalb Library is here for you, says Rachel. Another consideration is internet reliability and bandwidth. So I know some people have experienced this just recently with the derecho, which was a super fun experience where I lost complete power for 2 days straight. But luckily, for some reason, my internet worked, so we were able to hook it up to our portable generator. So I was still able to work. But things like that happen, natural disasters, weather events that might affect internet reliability. I know a lot of Comcast customers were without internet. ComEd had about 1 million people just in northern Illinois who were without power at first. Now luckily my power is back on. But internet reliability is an issue, especially in a rural area. So I live in the middle of cornfields. I have satellite internet. And when it rains, sometimes it's not as reliable. Or when there's extreme weather, it's not as reliable. So you need to think about internet reliability, and that's another consideration for synchronous sessions because you need more reliable internet and more bandwidth for a synchronous session than you might for something asynchronous. So think about that. Also think about data. So does your student need to connect via their smartphone, for example, to your synchronous session? How much data is that going to use up? Do they have the ability to do that too in case their internet goes out? Does your school district or your institution have access to Wi-Fi hotspots for students? That might be something to point students to, those resources. So think about all of those things. And also, I hadn't mentioned this, but this is good when talking about pandemic teaching, just teaching in general, is when you're teaching an online class, have links to resources for students. I always include links to information about the food pantry. If my institution has a food pantry, then I link to that, or I'll link to information about a community food pantry as well. And information about how they can access that, whether they need documentation or whether they can just walk in and get food that they need without having to prove that they need it, which is always great for school food pantries to not have to prove need, because that can be embarrassing. But also just academic services, counseling center, the health center, how they can get health care, if you have any information about that. So any resources that you think might be helpful for your students, and then highlight those. You might highlight those in your welcome video, or in one of your synchronous sessions, or in a specific video for that, or an announcement. But give students as much information as they can and as many resources as they can to succeed. One last consideration for pandemic teaching that I'll talk about is other people in the household. So a lot more people are working from home now. There's a lot of students who are going to be e-learning. I know that and correct me if I'm wrong, but the DeKalb public schools are going to be starting off completely with e-learning, and then reassessing that to maybe switch to hybrid, or to stick with e-learning in October and beyond. So, but at least first quarter, I know that Sycamore is starting with hybrid. Genoa Kingston is still debating that. The superintendent, I know, had mentioned wanting to do e-learning, and the school board is resisting that and wanting hybrid options. So, there's going to be a lot of different things going on. Different people are going to have different home circumstances with virtual learning. So what are the other people in the household going to be doing? Is someone, a younger sibling or an older sibling going to be doing e-learning, or taking an online class? And, are they going to have to be in a virtual synchronous session at the same time? How is that going to work? Do they have the bandwidth for that? Is their internet reliable enough for that? Are their parents working from home and on the internet as well? So, providing opportunities for flexibility for students, to account for maybe those challenges that they might have, maybe childcare, elder care. If you teach older students, high school students or college students, maybe their parents are essential workers and they aren't working from home, but that leaves them responsible for helping their siblings with e-learning and childcare. Or perhaps they have older family members living in the household too, and they need to take on some responsibilities for elder care. So just think about the different circumstances that our students might have. We can't necessarily ask them, about them specifically. We can ask them, is there anything that you want me to know about your circumstances that might impact, the way that you perform in this class or are able to interact in this class, but not requiring them to reveal that personal information, but giving them an opportunity to share if they want to, so that you can just be aware of that. I know that when I switched to remote learning in the spring, I taught ALP English. So it's a accelerated learning program English, where developmental students are placed in a developmental course and in Composition 1 at the same time. And the developmental course is meant to supplement their learning and help them succeed in the Composition 1 class. So when we moved to remote learning, none of my students were happy about it, and neither was I. But I tweaked things a little bit. So we had these learning journals where every week they would talk about what they learned and what they wanted to know more about from the previous week. And then we would address that. So I gave them an option to just write about what they were worried about, what they were experiencing during the pandemic. And if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't opened it up to that, then I wouldn't have known that one of my students' mom tested positive for COVID in May, and that her whole family had to then be quarantined because her mom watched her daughter, or that somebody else's grandmother had tested positive. So, knowing those things kind of helps you connect with your students more, and it also makes you a more empathetic educator, and really helps you see why flexible course policies might be a good way to go for that. All right, so the thing we've all been waiting for, technology tools and options. All right, so I'm just going to minimize the participants so I can see all of these here. Okay, so first things first, before you decide which technologies you want to use to help facilitate your students' online learning, you want to consider which tools will help you achieve your course objectives. So we don't want to use technology just because we want to use technology. We don't want to use it for the sake of using it. We want to be intentional about the use of technology and choose tools that are going to help us facilitate student learning and achieve those course outcomes. So we want to choose the most appropriate technology for the circumstance. So one thing that I want to highlight is open educational resources, or for short, OERs, which are becoming much more popular. I've seen them become more popular. The trends kind of and equity issues tend to start off in the community colleges because there's a lot more students, a lot more diverse student body in community colleges. And so OERs have been very popular starting in community colleges, and now they're moving kind of towards universities as well. But to help ease your workload, I do recommend using existing learning resources. NIU has come a long way, for example, with increasing and improving access to affordable course materials for students. Our library actually has had a textbook affordability task force, and they created a resource for faculty that illustrates the impact of expensive textbooks on students. And it includes ways to discover high quality, low cost, or free alternatives to textbooks. And I will share that link with you in just a second. So I'll be sharing that link in the chat to the textbook affordability guide for faculty. They also have a guide for students too, so you'll be able to see that if you go to their library guides. And let me know if that link does not work for you. I have not tested it yet today. So if they randomly change the URL, then I will have to find a new one. There's also a guide for faculty, and this one's a little bit hidden. So you might think that when you click on the link, the tab at the top, that you can access this, but it's a little bit of a hidden gem. But it's for how to choose accessible course text so that all students are able to access your course materials. And I'm sharing that link with you as well. So we've got two links there, and that's some NIU library links. And they've got links to some open educational resources there, including Merlot, some of the big ones, Merlot, Open Textbook Library, OER Commons, there are some main ones. There's a bunch of other ones there too as well. And those resources are available on the library's website at those links for anyone to access, not just NIU faculty and students, because they are open access resources. You can click on them and you can access them too. So please do feel free to explore those and see if there's anything that you find valuable. In addition, with the resources that you have along those same lines are your learning management system. Find out what tools are already available to you through your learning management system. Sometimes a lot of faculty, particularly at NIU, had been using Blackboard just to post handouts. Say, oh, the syllabus is there and, some handouts are there. So they didn't really know all of the features, and there's tons of features that are available. So they didn't know them all, and so that was our job last spring, was to communicate that. So here are all of the cool things that you can do with Blackboard. So whether you're using Canvas or Blackboard or Desire to Learn or another LMS, Moodle, there should be some embedded tools within the LMS that you could use to enhance your students' learning experience. So an example at NIU, we have Kaltura Capture integrated with Blackboard. So we got Kaltura Capture. I think we were piloting it for a year or so before we adopted it. But it's a very useful lecture capture tool that helps faculty record and edit asynchronous lessons. And they can record just themselves, or they can record a PowerPoint presentation or slides or demonstrations that they do on the computer. They can show students different websites. And it generates auto captions for those videos, which helps with the accessibility piece. And it houses the media too in a media library that the faculty member can see, their own media library, and then they can embed that directly into their courses. And it's technically a tool link embedded in their course. So it doesn't take up any space in their course. And a lot of faculty members were recording lectures and then uploading them to their course. And I think each course has maybe 1 or 2 gigabytes of memory. And so they were like, well, I ran out of memory, so can you give me more? Well, this is one of those options to not use up that memory. Another option, if you don't have, your institution doesn't have something like Kaltura, an asynchronous recording and repository tool, is to use YouTube. And then you can include a YouTube link within your LMS, or some, have the embed feature for YouTube videos specifically, or for videos in general. With Kaltura, you can make a Kaltura quiz. So you create your video, you upload your video, and then you can create a quiz out of that video to embed quiz questions throughout the lecture to keep students engaged. So students, there's different settings. You can force students to answer the question before they can move on in the video. You can prevent students from skipping ahead in the video using Kaltura quiz. So there's a lot of cool features that are already built into our LMSs that we might just not know about. So, if your institution has, an instructional technology person, they might know more about that, or you can contact the LMS provider specifically. They usually have help desks that can also help you. And then you can just also explore the LMS and just look at all of the different features that you have. So try to see what you already have that might work before you look elsewhere, especially before you consider technology that students are going to have to pay for. So before you make students pay for something, see if there's another option that will do it equally as well and achieve those same objectives, but that you already have access to. So some other tools, there's a ton of other technology tools that are available for free or for a small subscription fee online. In the spring, a lot of places made a lot of online tools, teaching and learning tools made subscriptions free or lower cost. So you might want to try to find maybe some of those deals if you're interested in that. But there are some that are just completely free, and I'll kind of highlight 3 of those right now. One is something that allows you to use ready-made lessons that you can incorporate into your course on Blackboard, and that is TED-Ed. So I'll include the link to TED-Ed there in the chat. And as I said, I'm going to share just 3 links with you to some free online technology tools. And these are just a starting point. It's obviously not an exhaustive list. There's a ton of tools out there. Kahoot was mentioned before. But it'll give you an idea of the kinds of technology resources that are out there to help you support student learning. So TED-Ed has a ton of searchable lessons that educators just like us have created already that correspond with a video from TED-Ed's vast library of videos, of educational videos. So you can use those lessons as is. So you can just, I found this lesson, I want to use it. Or you can actually edit a lesson that somebody else has created to suit your own needs. You can also create your own lessons through TED-Ed. So you can search through their video library based on subject or based on topic. Find a video that you like. You can even crop that video if you only want to show, a part of it that's really applicable to what you're talking about. And then you can link that video to a lesson, and you can create opportunities for discussion and assessments, quizzes within your lesson. And then you can link that lesson on your LMS. So you can just do a link share. They're working on, I think the last time I checked, they were working on piloting LMS integrations. So TED-Ed is fairly new, but if you can look into see if maybe they've got an LMS integration available, whether that's something that needs to be adopted institutionally, or sometimes those integrations can be enabled by the instructor as well. And TED-Ed is free to use, so that one is useful. And then let me find, here we go. Put these out of order for myself, but I'm going to give them to you in order. So YouTube has actually created an educational channel. So you could also just search for educational videos just on plain YouTube on any course topic that you want. I've done that before they came up with their educational channel. But pay attention to who's posted the video. Make sure to watch the entire video before sharing it with your students to avoid any inappropriate, inaccurate, or irrelevant content. I have had faculty members tell me that oh, this video is good. I watched the first few minutes and then there was something random at the end, and they rued the day that they didn't watch the entire video before they shared it with their class. But and then also just be aware that anytime somebody posts something on YouTube, they can always take it off. So, you know, I've had that happen to me too, where I want to show my students this video and I want to show it to them the next semester. And then the next semester, the video has been taken down by the owner. So, you know, you might want to have a few options in your pocket just in case that video doesn't work. But you can use short videos to spark conversation in online discussion boards, or you can have students reflect on or respond to the ideas presented in the video, or you can have them connect what they've learned to concepts presented in the video clip. And as I mentioned, YouTube has created recently a learning channel that, you know, might prove useful as you cultivate resources. So that's what that link there is. And then there's also just subject-specific technology out there too. And one of those is Better Explained. So subject or discipline-specific sites are really useful, especially for like STEM classes. They can help you share content with students online while easing your workload a little bit, because, you know, explaining those concepts can be pretty time-consuming in ways that students can understand, especially online, where you can't necessarily do all of the demonstration that you might want to do or that you're used to doing in a face-to-face class. So this website, Better Explained, has math lessons that begin with the bigger picture, and then they use text and video to explain the specifics. So that's just one example of a discipline-specific website for learning content that you could incorporate into your course. Ultimately, it might be worth investigating whether there's existing resources that'll help you lessen your workload while still helping you facilitate those effective learning experiences for your students. And I'll share, you know, after Q&A, I will share a bunch of links to resources too. I've got like a whole list of them here, but I don't want to clog the chat with those in case somebody wants to ask a question. So if anybody has questions that are specific to your circumstances or things that you're worried about or that I didn't cover, please do let me know. You can post to the chat, or you can use your microphone. So I'll just kind of give you a second to think about it. Okay, Corinne, so gamify. So basically kind of creating making games, making their learning kind of like a game almost. So gamify. So for the example that I was talking about was Yellow Dig. So creating multiple opportunities for students with Yellow Dig to get points. So they have to do certain things to get certain points, and it kind of can become sort of a competition or a game with themselves, and make the learning experience a little bit more interesting and more engaging. Yes, that is the correct spelling, Yellow Dig. Yeah, so with Yellow Dig, for example, the gamification in that involves, you know, giving students like scaling points. So students get a certain number of points, and you can set the points up in Yellow Dig. Students get a certain number of points for just posting their response that week. If they post the response earlier in the week, so on Monday instead of on Friday or Saturday or whenever the last day of your class is for that week, I do Monday through Sunday. So if they post on Monday, then they get more points than if they post on Sunday. So there's kind of a range of points that they can earn. Yeah, definitely would work well. It's working really well. And the nice thing about Yellow Dig too is because it's gamified in that way, and you can set up the points. And there's other platforms and other tools that you can use similarly. But the nice thing about Yellow Dig in that it's integrated into our LMS and we have a subscription to it at NIU is that it auto grades for us. So like that gamification aspect, like when students post, how they post, what kind of reactions they get from their classmates in that week, it's all kind of calculated up, and they have access to, you know, the information about that within Yellow Dig. So they can click on the grade icon in Yellow Dig and find out how they can earn points. And then however much they participate that week, they get that many points, and it automatically gets input into the grade center. So it's a great way to get students engaged and to get them talking about the class. And it comes in as sort of a thread. So it's not like our LMS discussion boards where it's like, okay, here's a discussion board and you have a discussion about this topic in this discussion board. It's just kind of all there. So you see what's been most recently posted first. You can mark things as red and then they'll collapse, but they're still there and you can open them up again. So, you know, it's a way to just create that kind of competition type feeling. And not necessarily that students are competing with each other, but they're competing with themselves. So how many points can I get this week? You know, I really want to have an engaging post so that people will respond to it and will, you know, react to it. And then I get, because they get points also for other people responding, other students responding to their posts and reacting to their posts. So it really kind of ups the ante, and then also takes away a little bit of the structure of a discussion where it's, okay, I need to post once and then I need to go back on the response due date, and then I need to post 3 responses to my classmates. So it kind of opens it up a little bit and makes it a little bit more of a fluid discussion. I hope that answers your question about gamification. Any other questions or clarifications? I know that a lot of people who took my online course design academy, which was at the beginning of July, that's when I piloted it in the online course design academy, Yellow Dig, and I had a lot of faculty who were very interested in it. And then they were in the online course design academy that's happening right now. Both sessions are using it. So they were initially going to be just using it for like a pilot for a certain number of faculty, but now so many people are interested, they're just going to open it up to whoever wants to use it.
Ooh, I really hope, like I know this is like my last semester of coursework for my PhD, but I hope my professors are like, yes, let's do this. But I know some of them, like, they're graduate students. They need to be professional. Gaming sounds just the best.
Yeah, it depends on which professor you had. Some of the younger ones are more willing to experiment with that. But I know a lot of the English faculty have taken the online course design academy, and some of them were a lot more resistant to the ideas, and even just for like normal online course design ideas than they gave some facilitators some hard times. I think they purposely didn't put the English people in my section. I think I had like a couple of English people, but Michael Day was in mine. But
I love Michael.
Yeah, he's great. We're friends on Facebook, so I get to see all of his cool nature pictures. He's such a good photographer.
Make the best pictures, and I love his running story with the Agent Cooper hawk.
Yes.
Yes.
Emily, so you've taken online classes at NIU, and you said it's enlightening to notice the ways that professors use Blackboard really well or not enough. Yeah, definitely. So a tool is a tool, right? It's only as effective as, you know, we want it to be and as we use it effectively.
Yes, thank you, Amanda, so much.
No
I'm going to
problem.
do another post of the survey if people could take it, just so I know how the program went, if we should offer further programs like this as the year goes on, especially hopefully we don't have any more curveballs. Let's all just channel our spirit,
Yeah,
God,
fingers crossed, right?
and that we as educators won't have any more
And
upsets.
I will also, let me see if I can find it. But I also have a PDF version of my PowerPoint if anybody is interested in it. So I'll try to find it.
Thank you. And then also next week, in case anybody is also an online student, I'm going to be hosting a kind of like this, but with tips on how to be the best online student you can be. So,
All right, so there's the PDF of the PowerPoint if anybody needs that.
Download that.
And I'll wait a minute before I before I share my list of resources with links.
Yes.
They're just kind of you know, articles. There's some things from our Keep Teaching website, some links to you know, articles of you know, tips with online pivots and stuff like that. So just a few things that I think could be useful to everybody, but I'll let everybody get to that that Google Doc first so that we don't lose it in the shuffle. All right, so I'll share that list of resources. So just the first one, be efficient, not busy, some time management strategies for online teaching. That's from Faculty Focus. Some tips from our, it says FactDev, but we've recently changed our name to Cital. So, but collecting assignments and delivering tests with Blackboard tools if you use Blackboard, facilitating online discussions, how to recover the joy of teaching after an online pivot. I think we could use that one. Flower Darby is great. She presented virtually for us for our online teaching symposium this summer, so that was a treat. And just a few other things, but the last one, I would say, don't pay attention to that. That's left over from remote teaching. But it was kind of an article about not doing a really great job of putting courses online when you're, you know, switching to pandemic remote teaching with like 24 hours notice, so that they don't expect that of you. But we have more time to plan now, so hopefully, you know, some things are still up in the air for some people, but hopefully we've got some contingency thoughts too. So
Do you have any resources that might be fun things that would work for younger students? Because I tend to work primarily with much younger age range.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's where those online, so I think we've mentioned mentioned Kahoot, learning games, so those kinds of engaged learning resources. Here, let me, oh, there we go. So Kahoot is one option, which you've probably, I think most people.
I've played with at least a little bit.
Yeah, so that's one really, really popular option for, you know, students of many ages. There's a lot of different options there. One that I was going to share too was, let me, was TED Ed as well. And this can be adapted. You know, you can find a lesson. You can create a lesson, you can discover lessons, discover lesson series. There's actually Earth School and Nature one specifically. So if you search for lessons here, they've got, you know, stuff for different ages too, and they've got it by subject. They've got, so let's see here. Even just the value of the arts, you know, we've got social studies. And they all kind of have the same section. So watch a video, think about it. There's, you know, some questions that you can have students answer, dig deeper. That's a place for you to add a little bit more information, and you can embed, you know, pictures and, you know, give them links to different things there too, so they can learn a little bit more. And then a guided discussion. You can customize every lesson that you want. So I love TED Ed because it actually kind of got me my job at NIU because I had to do a presentation on some sort of instructional technology. So I was searching, and this just caught my eye. So I created a TED Ed lesson, and then I delivered a workshop to the faculty development on how to use TED Ed. But so if you're editing it, you know, it gives you all this information. You can crop the video, you can change the video if you just want the content, although the content is usually directly connected to the video. You can adjust settings, you can preview it first if you want to. So those are some different options there. But yeah, there's a ton of different resources online that you can use. I like TED Ed because it's got not just the video component, but also the customization, the different types of opportunities for engagement. Yeah.
I didn't realize they had that much customization that went along with it. I love that.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, you can just create it from scratch too. So you can just, you know, find a video that you think is really cool and then create a lesson around it that's completely customized for you, for your students. So, and then you publish it, and then you share that with them, and then they can go in there and interact with it and watch the video and do the engagement activities.
Are you able to upload your own videos of yourself to go along with it to go and enrich the
Let me double
lesson?
check that. Yeah, let me check. Oops. So I think, let me manage my lessons. I have, now what's the point of ballet isn't my lessons. Let me edit this. I think it's limited in that way. You can add links. So in your supplemental information, you can add links and images, but you can't upload your own video. So for example, if you wanted them to watch another video, you could do that. Or what you could do is, you can't upload your video to TED Ed, but when you create a lesson, instead of finding a TED Ed video, you can put a YouTube link in there. So if you upload your video that you created of yourself to YouTube, then you just get that share link to that, and then you can put it in here and it'll upload it and you can create a lesson around that video.
Okay.
So that's another option for more personalization.
I'm still working on exactly what this year's looking like.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what things are going to look like. I think things are still up in the air.
And I'm in an informal setting, so I'm an informal educator at Discovery Center.
Okay.
And so we're trying to decide possibly doing longer, bigger curriculums for and trying to help some of the families that are choosing to keep their kids home, and helping them with curriculums that they're going to struggle with.
Right.
And so we need a slightly more robust curriculum than we normally do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, TED-Ed is also nice, or, any lesson sharing platform is really nice just to kind of see what other people are doing too. So even if you don't end up using it to create your lessons, kind of taking a look at other people's lessons. YouTube is nice for that too, YouTube Learn. Just, looking for what other people are doing and then kind of getting some ideas sparked off of that and then figuring out how you want to do it.
Well, thank you. This was very helpful tonight.
You're welcome. I'm glad it was helpful.
I'm gonna do a little down to the chest.
Let me stop sharing TED-Ed.
Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Amanda, for hosting and doing all this.
You're welcome. Yeah, and if anybody, wants to talk to me, I can give you my LinkedIn address, my profile page, and then you can message me there, just so I'll get that to my regular email. But let me find my profile. So I'll post that, and then if you have any questions, you can feel free to contact me if you need more ideas.
Again, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Much more, because I was unable to go to any of the online academy, anything. So
we do, if you go to our website, we have, and I'll share this with everybody because the videos, we record all of our online workshops. So if somebody can't make it, then they can watch the recording later, and the recordings are available to everybody. You don't have to be at NIU to have our recordings. So I'll share a couple of websites with you guys. So for this one, this is our Flex teaching site, and I'm gonna just share the workshops page. So the workshops registration is the first thing that's gonna pop up, but if you look at, if you scroll down below the featured workshop, there's a tab that says workshop recordings, and you can click on that, and then you can watch any one of the recordings, and I'm featured in some of them. The Holding Virtual Office Hours, the newest one is actually me. But you can watch any of those. They're embedded, so you click on it and you can just watch it directly in your browser. So there's that, and then if you look across the top, there's more sections than just workshops. So we've got resources, we've got guides for flexible teaching, blueprints, technologies. I'll also share where we've kind of moved away from our Keep Teaching website, but there's still some helpful resources there. So I'll share the resources page because it's got some nice tools there too. So there's that resources page on our Keep Teaching website. And that's got things like, options for, well, if you use Blackboard, Blackboard is the first tab there, but there's also information about OERs, LinkedIn Learning, video authoring, web conferencing, and some of this stuff is specific to NIU's tools that are available, but some of it, is a little bit more open.
Thank you again so much. I know I feel so much relief right now. Because I know, what is it? Summer semester just ended, and I took a summer lit course, and which, oh my God, it almost killed me. And now I'm like,
Yeah, I took Dickens during the summer, so that was 1,000 pages a week.
yeah, I took Victorian horror lit.
So Victorian lit during the summer. Masochistic.
It really is. Oh man. But again, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I think that is it.
Okay,
Bye.
great. Well, thanks for having me.
So bye.
Bye.